Hello everyone, in this video we are going to see the concept of process in Unix. So we all know that there are three components, major components in the system: processing, memory and I/O. So here the processes are the major task of any program. Any program is divided into so many processes. Processes can be subdivided into tasks, and tasks may be divided into threads and so on. Thread is the minimum unit of process which can be executed in the system. Now let us see what is in process in the Unix. So Unix has some its own specific processes, and as we all know that every process has its own ID, because with that is the ID is the one the process can be identified. So every process should have a process ID. And we also know that process table is there. Whenever a program, whenever a command is created in Unix, okay, when a command is given in the Unix, that means you are creating a new process. That's it. Okay, so when a process is created, naturally we have an instance of a running program. That means it is a part of the running program, which is a process. So once a process is initiated, it will be given a process ID, and that ID is an unique ID. That means it uniquely identifies the any process. But even though the process IDs are repeated in some interval of time, but at a point of time no two processes with the same PID exist in the system. That means no process can have the same PID, otherwise it will be a confusion. Okay, so ID is a unique identity, so every process will have a separate identity, that is the process ID called PID. So now how to start a process? When you start a command, when you run a command, naturally the processes are started. So there are two types of processes, which is foreground processes and background processes. As the name implies, foreground processes they are run in the foreground, where it can get the input from the keyboard and it sends output to the screen. Okay, but when the program is in the foreground, naturally it is a time consuming process. Why? Because the keyboard is, we have to get the process has to get the input from the keyboard, process it and send it to the output. That means we know that input output process is slower than the computing process. Even though the computer computes fast the instructions and it does the process, the time consuming in getting in the input and processing the output will be a time consuming process. So it is natural to say that when a program runs in the foreground, it is a time consuming process. Okay, that means no other commands can be run in that time. So that we have one communication, one comfort in this processing management, that we are having a background process. What is a background process? Is a background process it runs without connected to your keyboard. That means it need not interfere with the keyboard processes, whether the system is going to get the input or not, but this background process is independently running inside the system without expecting the result from the keyboard. Okay, that means it starts the processing once it gets the input from the keyboard. The advantage of running a process in the background is you can run the other commands. That means in the foreground we can run some other commands, means we can do some multiple tasking in this case when we are using the background processes concept. So when it run in the background, you need not have to wait for any other process. It will just complete to start the another. You don't need to wait for the process to complete. We can keep on start with the other processes. And how to make a process as background processes? Just we have to attach an ampersand symbol at the command. That's all. Okay, so simplest way to start a background process is to add an ampersand symbol at the end of the command. When you mention this command, naturally it will become a background process. There are also two more processes called as an orphan process and zombie process, and before that we see what is parent and child process. So we know that every processes once create, it is a parent, and the parent can create multiple child processes. So naturally, even though the processes belong to a parent and a child, every process will have its own separate ID. Okay, so now the process ID is called as an PID, and the parent process is called as an PPID, parent process ID. Okay, so each user processes in the system has a parent process. In case if the parent processes is terminated before the child process, then the process called as an orphan processes. It happens that in some cases the parent process creates some child processes and the child processes keep on running in the system, but the parent process has been terminated or finished for some reason. In that case, the processes which is running without the parent is called as an orphan process. And what is the zombie processes? There are some process called defunct process. That means that is not functional. Okay, it is not functional. It has started the execution, it did some function, but after that the function is over, it is completed, but that because of some communication problem between the parent and the child processes, the parent process must not have make some entry in the process table as it is an completed process. That means every process table has the entry of the parent process as well as the child process. Whenever the child process execute its process, it will report to the parent process that it has completed the work. At that stage, the parent process must make some update in the process table. In case the parent process failed to update the process table, for example, it did not invoke an wait system call, that is one example given, naturally the process, whichever the function is completed also, the entry will be there in the process table. So it is called as a zombie process or an defunct process where the process is not functional. So that's all the basic concepts of process in Unix, and thanks for watching.